Can you believe it? We are here for the beginning of the 25-26 Premier League season, and here on the Quinny FC, the Quinny Football Community Channel, we've been doing our best to keep across all the summer transfers to see who are going to be the main runners and riders, who could be the dark horse, who looks set to be crowned champions, and who is fighting against relegation. And this summer transfer window has been pretty epic on all levels. I really do think we are in for a classic Premier League season, one that will go down in the history books as one of the toughest leagues ever to win the title in and to avoid relegation, as well as all the other European qualification spots in the middle, cups, domestic and on the continent as well. It really does feel that this season has got everything at its fingertips. Now, my Premier League predictions last season were a lot of fun and we had some mixed success. I did predict Man United were going to finish in 13th. In 14th, guys, I've got Man United, and I just cannot put them ahead of anyone else that is ahead of them in this list. And that wasn't me trolling. A big part of that was down to the strength of the squad and looking at the rest of the strength and depth that so many other teams seem to have in the division, as well as having like a steady hand from the dugout in control of these clubs versus, I say, Man United, the absolute laughing factory. I thought Brighton would have had the sort of season that Nottingham Forest had, and the likes of Villa, Newcastle, Liverpool winning the title. There was a few things that you expected these teams to do well, but where they actually finished, you maybe didn't quite forecast. Spurs just about fighting off relegation, I don't think anyone had, but other than that, the relegation battle, I think most people kind of seen it coming. Whereas this year, who's going to win the title, who's going to finish in those spots, everything I've just already mentioned is so hard to predict. At any point in the video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Of course, no matter what team you support, get into the comment section and let me know where you predict your team is going to finish, what you agree with in the video, what you maybe take issue with, or something you maybe think I'm getting wrong, of course, whatever. Jump into the comment section as ever. But yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one, because I'm just going to get straight down to business and I'm going to start from the top of the Premier League and work my way down. And for me, I really do think it's a really tough one. I think between Liverpool, Arsenal and City, each one of them has got a really strong case to be, you know, the pre-season favourites coming into this one, the team that will go on to win the title. And I think really each to their own. There's not really a wrong answer to be had amongst any of them. And my 25-26 Premier League champions is going to be Liverpool. I think there was just such a seamless transition last year from the Jurgen Klopp era into the Arne Slot era, with no transfers, by the way, last season whatsoever. And coming into this year, the transfers they've done have been massive. They have been over the top and they have really strengthened Liverpool from a great position of strength. Now, can they get Alexander Isak over the line to make this forward line a bit deeper in quality, to be able to rotate between Champions Leagues and, you know, the real fixture congestion we get around Christmas, that sort of thing? And can they get Mark Guéhi in to really fill out the defence and make sure they've got enough options to cover across the whole season? But that aside, the addition of Frimpong, Wirtz and Ekitike are absolutely massive. These are guys that Ekitike really should be in the sniff, should be in the hunt if he is the starting striker. Again, let's see what happens with Isak to be a golden boot contender. Florian Wirtz for me is going to be right in the hunt for player of the year. This is a world-class attacking midfielder that the Premier League is only, you know, the last time is Kevin De Bruyne, really. This is the sort of impact he's going to have for Liverpool, where he is just going to really change the game. A really hard-working forward that can fill in a number of different positions. And that link-up he already has with Frimpong is going to be so vital for Liverpool smashing teams. And I think that's what we're going to see from them. We're going to see Mo Salah getting into that Ballon d'Or nominee kind of form again. You can just feel it. And overall, like, I think they'll win the league personally. And for me, if it's not going to be Liverpool that wins the league, it has to be Arsenal. Again, similar to Liverpool, strengthening their squad from a position of strength. They've not really lost any massive marquee name that really changes the dynamic of the squad or the quality that they've got at their disposal. But with the additions of Zubimendi, Noni Madueke, and of course Gyokeres, you really do feel that they have filled out the edges. They have filled in the gaps of what they've been missing this entire time. Zubimendi is tipped by a lot of people to be a real revelation at Arsenal, and I can very much see that happening, having watched a lot of La Liga, watched a lot of Real Sociedad for my sins over the last couple of years. Although they've been woeful, Zubimendi has been very, very good in a very poor team. I think the addition of Madueke is going to be a little bit understated in pre-season because he is a very direct guy, and I've seen a lot of this guy from when he was coming through the England youth national setup. I love a youth international tournament myself, and you know, at PSV the guy was a highlight reel machine, and I think at Chelsea his contribution was probably understated or undervalued, and I think he could be like the hero of the transfer window, outside of Gyokeres, who is the long forgotten centre forward striker that Arsenal have never really had for so long, that is seen to be the final piece of the Arteta puzzle. For me, I just don't see Arteta winning a Premier League. That's kind of where I fall down on putting Arsenal into my second spot prediction. But looking at the squad, I think by all measures of metrics and stats and whatever, they really should be the favourites for this. The squad is so deep, they can play the same sort of tactics and formation. They've got good young talent coming through as well. Champions League, fighting for the top end of the league. A lot of this squad has done that already. Sure, they've not went that final step yet, but with the reinforcements they've got, surely all the excuses are off the table now. And Arteta, led by Gyokeres, and this kind of revamped and final edition Arsenal squad, do go the distance, do bridge that gap. Maybe not quite for me personally. I've got them in second. And in third, I'm going to put Man City. Now, I do think the Man City squad, and I do think Pep Guardiola are very much in legacy mode. They've did the 4 in a row. They've won a Champions League, of course, done doubles and trebles and all that kind of thing. But I do think for Pep Guardiola, you know, if you listen to him, he does talk about after City, after the contract he's on, he's going to be taking a wee bit of a break on the beach or whatever. I think the Champions League is going to be his main focus. I think the additions of guys like Rayan Cherki, we've seen Marmoush come in the January window as well. It looks like they'll be holding on to Savio. And when you look at the strength and quality they've got, they may even be adding Donnarumma into this situation as well, but in midfield and in defence, they're going to do well in the league. They're going to manage all competitions well. They're going to fight for every game. You kind of know that with Pep Guardiola and Man City. But I think the main thing he's going to be pushing for at this moment in time for his legacy as a manager, as a Man City, as a Premier League manager, is going to be another Champions League final. I think if you were to look at Pep Guardiola's tenure at Man City, the league titles, the cups, I think they would all come in as par. You would expect that, wouldn't you? And in Europe, at the moment, it's 2 finals with 1 win. Again, I think you would call that about par with the amount of time he's been there, the amount of money, the quality of players that he's been had at his disposal. I have already said I think Cherki is the closest thing that Pep has had available to him since the man himself, Lionel Messi, and I cannot wait to see how Cherki evolves under Pep Guardiola. But the sort of players that Man City are really packing here, Doku, Marmoush, Savio, Cherki, Haaland, of course, the epitome of the arrowhead striker, with the likes of your Fodens and Bernardos still in the building. I think getting to a Champions League final is the very thing that is at the front of their priority list this year. I do think they'll obviously win the league if they can, and they, you know, it's at it's within touching distance or whatever, they'll go for it, don't get me wrong. But I think this team looks like it's going to be more effective in those Champions League matches rather than grinding out a Premier League season, if that makes sense, because players like Cherki, Doku, Marmoush, all these amazing kind of front foot, high octane players, we've seen it for City in years gone by, never mind other clubs, but they're very good in periods, in spurts, you know, they punch in bunches, don't they? And in seasons where they're wildly successful, they do a very good job of lining that up so that they don't ever feel that, you know, the team's going out of form or losing its cutting edge. And I think this squad, for those players, they're just a bit on the younger side, a little bit less experienced versus, you know, the Fodens and the Bernardos, those kind of midfielders, and then the guys in defence or whatever that have been over the course and done it before. And I think that might just be the undoing of Man City, like, winning the league essentially. But I think they'll win the Champions League. Now, contrary to my predictions from last season, I actually think Man United are going to come in and finish in 4th in this upcoming season. I think the reinvented front three that they've got here, we're expecting a lot more transfers to go out the way for Man United. Maybe that signals another incoming player eventually, who knows? But you know, with the likes of Garnacho, Sancho and Anthony, you would think they're not really in the picture. But Mbeumo, Cunha and Sesko, for me, Man United have got no midweek football. They're not in Europe this year. They've only got the domestic cups and then focus on the league every year. And if you roll back the clock, you know, back when it used to be Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, only the ones fighting for the table, the team that would creep in there, it could be anyone from the pack. Sometimes it was Newcastle, one time it was Everton, quite often it was Liverpool, but it could always just be somebody else. And I think that's the sort of character arc that Man United are going to have this year, where weekend to weekend they're just getting on with business, they are putting teams away. And I think this attack is going to just crush in the league. Højlund might also go out the door, but if they do keep Højlund and Xerxes, like those front 5 up there for running across 90 minutes across the season, with injury, suspension, rotate for form and all that kind of thing, you know, there's going to be very few teams that keep this team out. I do think defensively they're still very suspect. The goalkeeper situation, this isn't an indication on the best choice defence for the first game of the season. Lisandro Martinez is obviously injured. Maguire's been coming back into a game. I know there's other bits and pieces moving around here, but for the most part, the defence is okay. I think they've got the goals to get really high up the table, but I do think the defence will kind of slow them down. I don't think they can really get much higher in fourth with the defence they've got. I like the thought of Bruno this year in just general terms. I think he could have a really good season, being really at the centre of the team here, really just given carte blanche, free rein to be his best version of himself. And Bruno Fernandes has been dying for a really good attack to play with here, and I think we could see the best version of him that we've seen in the Premier League this season, and I think he'll be a big part of the success Man United have. But I think between the front three, all three of them are going to be contenders for like signing of the summer. I don't want to call them value because they were all like 70 million, weren't they? But outside of the Florian Wirtz level transfers, I think Man United have just about recruited as well as anyone, if not better. And when it comes to Chelsea, I've just sincerely never got any idea where to start with what their first team is supposed to be, what their best 11 is. This is all the players they still have registered to them, and they are just awash with talent. I think João Pedro is going to be a huge level up for them, and Chelsea, if they're not fifth, they're only going to be higher on the table, and I think it'll because, of the firepower, the finishing quality that he now offers them. But when you look at the fact that they're bringing Estevao as well into this squad, obviously they've still got Cole Palmer, but alongside the likes of Gittins, Pedro Neto did well last year. The midfield is pretty cooking with the likes of Enzo, Caicedo, Andre Santos, Lavia still in and around the building. They have got a million different defenders. They've just signed Hato in from Ajax as well. They won't be able to do the whole, rotate the whole squad for the Conference League effort that they did last year because they're the Champions League this year. But I do think they've got just about enough quality where they will be able to manage everything well enough, and I think they're going to be right in amongst it all season long. But I'm just not really a fan of the Chelsea defence, particularly the goalkeeper situation, but I do think João Pedro now is going to offer a lot more goals into the makeup for Chelsea, and like I say, if they don't finish fifth, it's only going to be higher. But I've got them in fifth. Now the next section of teams are really kind of split and decided on how many goals are they going to score, because all of these clubs that are going to finish in between 6th and 11th, really in the top half of the table, give or take, with the one team that will miss out, of course, is they've got good squads. They've got high quality players in all different positions. They've probably got good levels of depth, but so many of them have got midweek football to think about this year, whether it be Europa League, Champions League, Conference League, whatever it is. And the teams that don't, maybe they've not quite got the same spread of quality across their squad. So it really, for this next batch of clubs, in terms of who's going to finish in those European spots, who will make it into the top half, and that one team that will just miss out, for me it is going to be a matter on goals scored. Now, as it stands right now, I've got Newcastle to come in 6th, and I'm not too sure what to think about the whole Alexander Isak situation. Is he going to stay? Will he play? Will he score? Will they replace him and get someone else in? I'm not too sure there's that many viable options out there in the market left for Newcastle, but there is some, like the guy Samu at Porto. There's a couple of guys available in Serie A they could maybe go after, maybe the Bundesliga the same. So, there's no options out there. Will they produce to the same level as someone like an Alexander Isak? I'm not too sure, but at point of recording, it looks like they're just about to sign Jacob Ramsey for Aston Villa, and this is a player that, this is a style of player that this team is really calling out for. And Gordon and Alanga, it's got really good wide attack players. We really like the midfield three that Newcastle prefer, Joe Linton, Tonali and Bruno, box to box, versatile, all that kind of thing. But the one thing they have been missing is that undeniably attacking midfielder that can bridge midfield in the front line. I've seen Jacob Ramsey in person, haven't seen Aston Villa last year or the year before, and this guy is an amazing player. I think he is so good, and I think like the same sort of impact you've seen from Ballon d'Or nominee Jacob Murphy last year, you could see on a more consistent and to a higher level Jacob Ramsey making those same types of contributions into the squad, and I think he just gives Newcastle now a whole different dynamic in attack. And if they can maintain, now that they've added in the likes of Malik Teo and Aaron Ramsdale, the defensive solidarity that we've seen them recapture again last year, I think Newcastle are no one's going to mug them off this year, and I think overall they do have enough goals in them. I don't want to say no matter who the striker is, because it does matter obviously, but if they have Isak, fine, it means they can maybe push in all different fronts, maybe try and go far in our cup competition again. And if it's someone else, maybe that kind of thing doesn't happen, but I do expect them, no matter who that may be, even if it's squeezing Gordon, shoehorning him in to be a last man attacker, and then you play like a Barnes out here or the Jacob Ramsey type player, I think Newcastle will score enough, and I think their defence is tight enough where we'll see them finishing in the 6th. And I'm going to have Aston Villa finishing just behind them in 7th place. But what I'm going to say about Aston Villa is, number one, They're my favourites to win the Europa League this year. If anyone can win the Europa League, it's Unai Emery. English teams have been doing very, very well in it the last couple of years, and especially the way it is structured now with the group stage and no drop down from Champions League and whatever. I think Aston Villa will be in the Champions League next year, but I think they're going to win the Europa League and they'll finish, I predict, 7th in the Premier League. They've just made their first main summer signing of Guisond, and I think, maybe he starts, maybe he doesn't, but the team is quite thin, although very high quality, and last year they finished 6th on 66 points, joint with Newcastle in 5th, just missed out on goal difference, and I don't really feel that they've added more goals into themselves this year. The same might be able to be said with Newcastle, but I would argue against that with Alanga and Ramsey. I think they've added more goals in. I don't think Villa have made themselves defensively any stronger, although I do think wee Boob's camera is on for a big, big season now that he's finally injury-free. We could see a real coming-of-age season for Morgan Rogers, and Ollie Watkins, you just know what you're getting from him at this point. But the team is way for thin in negotiating midweeks and weekends. This is going to be a really choppy one for Villa. They might even finish a little bit lower in the table if they do go on to clinch the Europa League. But as things stand at the moment, with the quality of manager and the squad that they've got available, I would have Aston Villa coming in 7th. And I think qualifying for Europe this year, we're going to see Everton. David Moyes is leading Everton into their new stadium. They've just signed Jack Grealish on a loan with a buy option attached to it. And I think Everton, similar to Newcastle, have got a real defensive presence, a real defensive somewhat reliability in their squad. They've got really good additions coming in this summer in the likes of Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, Tierno Barry. I think is going to be a real addition for them up front. But adding someone in like Jack Grealish is like a next level step up player. This is similar to the sort of level we've seen Newcastle take their kind of journey back up the table with, as the same with Aston Villa. I think he's got massive point to prove, and I think David Moyes is going to let him off the leash. David Moyes wants to be the old school cool dad guy. It says, oh, you sign Jack Grealish and you let him do what he wants. And I think that's what is going to happen. And I think that is only going to help Everton. Again, they've not got midweeks to worry about or anything like that. We had some great interactions from Everton fans on the channel. You guys fancy O'Brien to be the right back. You aren't happy with right back. You think you need to make another signing here. I know Branthwaite is injured and Keane is likely to play the first game. But what you get with David Moyes and what you get with these types of characters in defence, particularly Pickford in goals, is a reliability, is a foundation. Protect the castle, don't make any mistakes, don't do anything wrong. And then when you've got players like Iliman and Dai, who reminds me a lot of Steven Pienaar, so he's on the board as Pienaar. Everton fans didn't seem to have a sense of humour or really get that. But when you've got him on one side, Dwight McNeil's still pretty formidable as well. This boy Armstrong's played quite a bit in pre-season. Alcaraz, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall supplying these kind of arrowhead target man strikers, and Tierno Barry and Beto. You might even say Yakubu style or Lukaku style. Everton have got a bit of form for this over the years. This feels like it could be a vintage Everton kind of season overall, and what a season it would be to open up the stadium with, as it were. So I've got Everton in 8th. Now, I thought Brighton were going to have a really special season last year, and I think with the new manager, the guy that's never been in the Premier League before, a relatively young guy, they did make some big sign, or had a lot of kind of turnover last year. They've made some more signings this window as well, but I do feel these signings were kind of leftovers. They should have been done last year, and I think this is maybe now Brighton almost the finished picture of what this squad dynamic is supposed to be built around. And with the manager now having a season of Premier League experience under his belt, I've got Brighton to break into to be in the top half, to be in 9th here. I'm not too sure what will happen with Matt O'Reilly and if there'll be any sort of domino effect, but maybe Brighton go back into the market and make some major reinforcements. By all accounts, they're going to keep a hold of Baleba, but if they do lose him, you totally back Brighton to go and replace him quite easily if they're going to cash in and sell him to Man United. But I think Brighton have got enough different ways to attack. They've got a really high quality of squad. It's super deep as well. And, all these guys have kind of been there, seen it, done it from last year. It'll be interesting to see how De Kuyper goes. I've got really high hopes that De Kuyper is going to be like a world-class left-back, and this will be a really good season to see where he stacks up. A guy that loves to attack, loves to get into the final third, into the back post. Him and Mitoma could just be absolute fire. And I see Brighton scoring a lot of goals this year, and like I said, I think if you're going to be in the top half, you need quality guys that can get into the final third and make chances happen. And I think Brighton have got a great blend of that, and as I say, with that another year of experience under the belt for so many of the squad here, I think they'll be all the better for it and they'll finish in 9th. Now, I really like the Nottingham Forest squad. I've got them coming in 10th this year, and I just think this is going to be a season of teething problems. We've seen this with Newcastle maybe a few years ago, where they first got into Europe and they really struggled to, do everything, be all things at all times. I do think Nuno has got a good experience of being at a club that has to deal with those kind of demands. So I do think they'll do well. I think they'll go far in the Europa League, and I do think that they'll finish in 10th in the Prem. But I think a lot of the team here don't have that experience in terms of the players, although they have the quality. And I think, they'll have a good season, but I do think it'll be one of those ones where it's kind of like Newcastle a few years ago, that year they first got into the Champions League in a kind of lesser scale. They could go the total opposite way. You never know, between now and the end of the transfer window, Forest could go and spend another bucket of money and maybe lift the level of the squad greatly. But I really like a lot of the Forest players. I really do like the way that they've built their team. I think Dan Ndoye is going to be a smash hit in the Premier League. Gibbs White, after signing that contract, I think is going to be on fire this year. And the defence was very well regarded and very well renowned last year. We all seen how effective Elliot Anderson and Chris Wood could be. And I think they've got so many different pieces of the puzzle here where they will be one of the better teams in the league, but I do think they'll struggle with all the fixtures that they've got to satisfy with this squad. They finished 17th last year. They're in the Champions League this year, and I've got them to finish in the bottom half. I've got them to finish in 11th, and that is Tottenham Hotspur. Now, I wasn't really holding my breath around this Thomas Frank appointment. I do think it's a good Premier League appointment, but it's not like The Super Cup, I think, really did speak volumes of what Tottenham have got themselves into this year. We have covered Tottenham already on the channel, where I was undecided with the team. The team is very good for an A and a B. Like the first string and the second string, there's not really that big of a gap in quality, and the level of player is overall quite good. But with no Son, with no Kane, none of these players have really been replaced. Maybe Kudus could be replacing one of them, perhaps. Kulusevski's probably the best player in the team right now. And the guy that won the final last year, Brennan Johnson, can't even get into the lineup at the moment. I think Spurs are just going to be a little bit too, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but I think when you hire a guy like Thomas Frank who has never won anything, then, and again, I know this is a whole topic of conversation, narrative or whatever around, the managers Tottenham have had before, they get guys that win stuff and it didn't work in bloody blah and whatever, and this guy, it doesn't matter that he's not won anything. But I think you can see from that Super Cup game, it does matter. Like if you want to be a team that win matches, that win titles, there is certain risk and reward you've got to enter into, and the squad you've got to build has got to be able to beat teams. And I think from what we've seen in that Super Cup thing, it was, maybe he learns from it. Maybe it's a real learning curve from him. But it really made me think, this is not going to be a good season for Tottenham. I do think they'll do better than last year domestically, because Thomas Frank is proven, this will be a Brentford season for Tottenham domestically. They'll maybe beat a few of the bigger teams. They'll maybe go on a wee run of 5 or 6 games where they don't lose. Maybe they win more often than not. But I don't think they're going to score. Again, they've only lost goals in the team, I think, for me. Have they got defensively better? Maybe. And then with the managers kind of being a more conservative, tactically less gung-ho than Ange Ball, I just think, they're going to naturally float into that kind of mid-table zone. And I do think the teams that we've already listed above them just have a little bit more than them, to be honest with you. So I've got Tottenham in 11. Now, I think West Ham under Graham Potter this year will do, kind of as expected. They'll probably beat a fair amount of teams. I do like the vibes that you get around the likes of Füllkrug and Jared Bowen. These guys are proper match winners. And with Lucas Paqueta now not having all that Bannon stuff hanging around him, I think that he's going to go back into shop window mode and he could become one of the most effective midfielders in the division. But the one thing I do worry about with West Ham is just the strength and depth, and really the goalkeepers. Like Hermansen has came in from Leicester, by all accounts statistically a very good keeper, despite getting relegated and whatever. But I'm never convinced with these buying relegated goalkeeper strategies. Between him and Areola, I'm not sure you can really hang your hat on either one of them. And although there's really good defensive midfielders in the squad, Alvarez, Guido, Big Tam, pick your poison between the three of them, I just feel that they're going to be open more often than not. And compared to some of the other teams that will finish higher in the division, I think they'll concede a few more, although they might be quite a high scoring team this year. And that for me just about puts West Ham into the conversation of, could they maybe squeeze themselves into the top half? They do have goal scorers, they do have a really high quality team. But then this next batch of teams that I think West Ham are maybe just a little bit away from, for me it's all going to be about the quality of your squad, the quality of your manager, if you're going to make it into those safe zones in 17 to 13, or if you're going to fall into the relegation zone. Now I've done my best to make this absolutely clear already, but I do think the relegation battle is going to be unlike any other we've seen before. And although the teams at the top end of this range of the table, 13th, 14th, 15th, aren't really normally in the relegation dogfight, I'm not really saying these teams will be like all the way to the end pinching points to make sure that they survive, but I really do think this is going to be where all eyes are for who finishes towards the bottom of the table. This is the sort of squads in the Premier League that have quality, but is the manager experienced enough to get them over the line? Do they actually have enough match winners in their squad to make the difference in those crunch 6-point games? And ultimately what I think this will boil down to in terms of the teams that survive or not is that floor of quality, just high level physicality footballers that have been there, seen it, done it, the right level of experience. And the factor is always going to be, how many goals do you keep out and how many do you actually score going forward? Sunderland have been one of the most exciting teams to follow in this summer transfer window, and I've got them finishing in 13th. I don't think they're going to be in the relegation dogfight, but I do think in spells in the season it might look like they're maybe within touching distance of it. I don't really think they're going to cruise all the way into the top half of the table and be blowing teams away. But as we set up to record this, reports are coming out that they're on the verge of signing Nordi Mukiele, and when we put that into the context of the midfield that they've built, the defence that they've already built, we've covered this a lot on the channel. If you want more details, feel free to check out the Sunderland content we've got here on the channel. I don't see people mugging Sunderland off. I don't see them getting rolled over. I think they've got the right amount of upper end quality as well, that they will be able to get some scalps off of the bigger teams across the division. And I think Sunderland are in for a really exciting year. Mukiele, for what it's worth, will be a best 11 calibre player at right back or centre back, maybe even in a back three. We've spoken about that on the channel. And for this video, I've just put him here as a white dot or whatever. But it will be all eyes on Talbe, Rig, Adringra, Paddy, Gui, Mayenda, Isidore, all these guys. If they can score the sort of goals Sunderland fans want them to, they might finish a bit more comfortably in 13th. Maybe even they could scratch themselves a little bit higher in the division. But I think Sunderland's defence and midfield is going to rank in amongst the best in the league, and that is ultimately what's going to get them into being in the sniff, in the contention for being mid-table, and maybe they've got one eye on getting into the top half for next season. I expect them to be involved in a lot of low scoring matches for the most part, but I expect them to be a team that looks, more experienced than the average team that gets promoted. I think the money they've spent has been very, very wise and very coherent. You can feel that a team has been built here. They've not just went and bought a bunch of random guys that are available on the transfer market that are within their budget. This has been quite deliberate, quite methodical, and I think the finished article that Sunderland have got is a proper strong defence and a high quality midfield. And again, just to reiterate, it's all eyes on the forwards. Can they win the matches? Can they score enough goals for Sunderland? I, for one, was really impressed with the Frankfurt team that Ole Glasner built, and when he was appointed Crystal Palace manager, I had full focus on all the moves that Palace were making, the tweaks in formation, and ultimately it's been really fun to watch them win the FA Cup last year, win the Community Shield to kick this season off. But it's been all quiet on the incoming front. Ole Glasner has already made comments to say this is going to be a little bit of deja vu from last season, where we maybe have a bit of a false start because we've not been able to recruit, we've not been able to strengthen the squad. It's all been about trying to hang on to Eze and Guy for as much as possible. It does feel like Guy is probably going to be on his way out the door, and the interest in Eze is ramping up even more so, isn't it? So it's kind of a wee bit jury's out on Palace when it comes to the Premier League for the quality of replacements that they'll get for these players, which is why I've got them coming in at 14th in the table. But I do think even when you take these guys out of the equation, I think Adam Wharton is going to have a really big season. I really like the wing backs. I think Mateta has got into a real groove, and Ismaila Sarr for me is a real match winner. I think Palace have got the right ingredients here, and have got a really strong manager. And although I think they're probably going to have a rather disappointing campaign in the Premier League, I think Crystal Palace are going to go and win the Europa Conference League this year. It feels like it would be something that written in the stars. They're in that tournament through injustice a little bit. Glasner has won the Europa League with Frankfurt. He's won the FA Cup with Palace, a proven cup winning campaign and manager. And we've seen the strength of the Conference League already. Palace maybe don't have the same strength and depth that Chelsea had to exploit last year, but you look at what West Ham did before. I think Crystal Palace, this is a competition they're going to go very, very far in and will probably be the highlight of their season. It will be all eyes on the remainder of the transfer window and I suppose the January transfer window for how they spend their money, how they reinforce their ranks, because the team, although the best 11 is rather strong and there's maybe 3 or 4 subs in and behind that maintains the level, it's a very thin squad, and that's why I've got them finishing 14th in the Premier League. Now, I really want to like Wolves, I really do. I quite often really enjoy watching a lot of the individual players that they've been recruiting over the last couple of years, but their transfer policy has been so disconnected. The change of managers has been a revolving door, and coming into this year, I think John Arias is a huge transfer that could make a big difference for them. It's a kind of the first player that I think they've had in a long time that really could connect midfield into attack a lot better than some of the players they've tried to do it with in previous years. Like Cunha's been great, Guedes maybe not so, Pablo Sarabia maybe not so much, but they've tried with this profile of player a few times, it's not quite worked out. I think this could be the year it does kick in for them with Arias. Hwang, if fit and available with a Jurgen Strand Larsen, Wales really do have a really high calibre. I think best 11, first 11 is really good, but where Wales have always fell down and where they continue to fall down for me is the defence and goalkeeper spot. They just seem allergic to actually improving it and solidifying it with good quality depth and upgrades. So I think Wales sadly are still going to concede far too many goals this year. Although they've got a good outfit, they might still do some business before the window. I think they'll score goals. They'll be a danger to almost every team at home and away. But with the goalkeeper defence situation that they've got, it will really require a miracle, I think, for them to really improve on previous years' performances. I was a big fan of Gary O'Neill. I thought he did a pretty good job, all things considering. And I think Wales will be alright this year. I don't think there'll be too much jeopardy on the relegation because of the quality they do have. But they will be in the picture. They will be in the frame for it. And it's all down to that defence and goalkeeper. Bournemouth have made big waves this window, selling their left back to Liverpool, one centre back to PSG, one centre back to Real Madrid. It's been quite an upheaval for them. They've not really went into the window at all to strengthen their squad, and when we look at the team that they've got coming into this year, they're definitely Premier League level, they're definitely Premier League capable, but they have lost a lot of defensive solidarity that kept them in a lot of matches last year, and with the injury problems they have had in the front line, they've needed this level of depth to be able to deal with all that throughout the season. I'm sure they're still going to do a little bit of business before the window closes. We're expecting them to sign Ben Doak, who I think could be great. I'm a bit biased being a Celtic fan, of course, it's where he started his career, but I'm not sure he really moves the needle that much for Bournemouth, where he really changes the complexion of the situation. And Donny Iraola is well versed in relegation scraps and relegation fights, and fighting against the tide with Rayo Vallecano previously, as well as doing it with Bournemouth in the Premier League last year. So I think Bournemouth are going to be safe overall. I think they've got really good players in every position. I think Truffier is going to be a great replacement for Gyokeres. This guy is just like Gyokeres. I'd liken him to Theo Hernandez if you're familiar with him. A very bombastic, very attacking left wing back, and I think they'll continue to get that kind of avenue of success out of the team. But I just don't see them increasing their goal output from last year, and I think they're going to concede a little bit more. Petrovic is a really good keeper, probably up there with Kepa, better than Neto and Travers, some of these other keepers that Bournemouth have messed around with in previous years. So, defensively, I think Iraola will do as well as possible with the unit, with the team. But I think Bournemouth ultimately are going to be lacking with that killer instinct in those make-or-break 6-point matches. And against the bigger teams, I'm not sure they've got scalp potential in them. So, failing any more transfers, and we will revisit this after the close of the transfer window, I've got Bournemouth to come in safe to maintain their Premier League status in its 16th. Now, Burnley have been the provincial yo-yo team, going up and coming back down. I think Scott Parker, he's maybe going to he's maybe going to be the middle ground between Sean Dyche and Vincent Kompany. Looking at how they're shaping up coming into this season, it might be like a 3 at the back, come 5 at the back type shape. They've really improved a lot of, wide attacking players. They've got a lot of power and pace in the front positions. And with the addition of guys like Ogochukwu, Broja, they're bringing in a bit more prestige, a bit more power in those prospects. Guys that have been in and around the Premier League for a little bit. I think the addition of Kyle Walker is absolutely massive. Dubravka, again, as well, has been around the block once or twice, knows what he's on about. And isn't this just vintage Burnley to when they had, Nick Pope, Tom Heaton, Joe Hart, Burnley love having 3 or 4 keepers, don't they? And they're back to their best self again here. And I think Burnley, they're going to have a really up and down season. I don't think they're going to string together bad form or good form really for any extended period of time. I think it's going to be very patchy all the way across the year. And I've got them coming in just about safe at 17th position. I think they'll just about get over the line. With the amount of quality players they've got in all these different positions, I think that with that spotty form, I think they'll just about manage to get the points in the games where they need them the most. And as the season drives on, they probably shouldn't fall apart as easily as some other clubs could. They've got a lot of different guys here who can find the back of the net, a lot of different guys that can find a route to goal, and a good level of experience, And again, Hartman is a player I'm very excited about. Esteve could be very good as well in this setup. Hannibal threatens to kick on. And then you look at the likes of Koleosho, Marcus Edwards, Chuana, Jadon Anthony. I think Burnley have definitely got enough going forward where in those must-win games against the other teams down the bottom end of the league, I think they'll have a really good head-to-head ratio. I think they'll survive. Now, Fulham have been quite operational under Silva, haven't they, for the last couple of years? But I just feel this year is going to be their final year in the Premier League. I see Fulham being one of the first. I've got them in 18th. I've got them getting relegated. I think the manager could leave at any given point throughout the season. If you look at any of the Premier League teams that I believe will finish above Fulham, there's a number of them that if they change manager mid-season, this guy's going to be on the shortlist again. And we've seen his willingness and his motivation to move on in his career. But Fulham have needed Willian to bail them out of kind of a sticky situation over the last season or two, actually. They've not improved. They've not signed anyone other than the backup goalkeeper. And yeah, sure, they've not lost anyone. They do have good players. I like so many of the players they do have in their team, but it is super thin. And if like a key injury happens, the manager leaves mid-season, maybe he gets sacked, maybe he doesn't do well or whatever, I just think Fulham are really sensitive to failure, and I think it doesn't take much to go wrong here, and Fulham are going to be in a lot of trouble. I don't think they've quite got the same goal-scoring power that we've seen from other teams already predicted to finish ahead of them in the division, and the defence is fine, but I think it's the goalkeeper that makes me confident around them being okay defensively. But I don't see them ever really controlling games, snuffing things out too much. And I think player per player, squad versus squad, how many goals will they score? How many will they keep out? I don't think this is going to be a good season for them, sadly. I think they're going to give away far too many points early season. It could mean curtains for the manager. And then this very thin squad with a new pair of hands coming in later on in the year. I just don't think it's going to go well for Fulham, sadly. I've got them down to get relegated, and they're going to be in 18th. I know this isn't the way they're going to line up, because I've already seen the match prediction for the first game of the season. I've been very impressed with a lot of the transfer business that Leeds have been doing. It looks like they're about to sign Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And, Leeds might upset the order here. They might be the one team I get totally out of sync. They might finish a little bit higher. They might be able to save themselves and become, a Premier League outfit again for next year. But when I really do compare them against the rest of the teams that are in the league, I just don't think they've quite done enough in the transfer window. I think they're still too championship levelly, and they're really relying upon too many players to make a big step up. Now, don't get me wrong, players can do it, but the level of ability, the level of talent we're seeing all across the league, the quality of new season additions that we're seeing all across the league, I think Leeds are just too far behind the 8 ball here, and they've not really done enough in the transfer window to bridge that gap for me. So I think this is a team that, again, maybe similar to a few of the other ones I have down towards the bottom of the table, I just don't see them really getting a good run of games going where they put lots of points on the board. I think because it's Leeds and, their fan base and the stadium and whatever, they could get a few scalps. They could beat Man United at home. They could go away to Arsenal and get a draw. They could do that kind of thing. But I think Leeds are the type of team that will let you down against Fulham, Bournemouth, Burnley, all those other kind of teams, and they'll lose the points that they probably really shouldn't. I'm not a big fan of Daniel Farke. I don't see him seeing the season out. That might save Leeds depending on when they do it and when they bring him in. I'm just not a fan of the guy as a manager, especially at Premier League level. I just don't think he's quite got it. And I think Leeds have the right minerals, have the right ingredients here. But like I say, I just don't think they've done enough in the window, and I'm not convinced the manager's the right man to keep them in the league for this season. So I've got Leeds to get relegated in 19th. Now, at point of recording, it feels like Otara will be one of the big name signings that Brentford are looking to make, but it does feel that Wissa is going to be on his way out to Newcastle. They've already lost Mbuemo, they've lost Norgard, and with the change of manager as well, I really don't have any faith that Brentford have replaced the goals that they've lost. I think they've lost a lot in the dugout as well. And, you know, Jordan Henderson is a nice player to add into this. I'm a big fan of Anthony Gibu Malambo, and I think he could be a bit of a revelation for them. Although he's not like a match-winning type player, I think he could have a very important role in the squad, and his presence will be felt. I'm a big fan of Kelleher. I really like a lot of the defence here for Brentford as well, but I just think they have lost spades of goals. I think, like I said already, they've lost far too much in the dugout, because Thomas Frank and Brentford, it was like a perfect machine. All the pieces complemented each other, and yeah, Keith Andrews probably should pick up where he's left off, but he's a wee bit too green, a wee bit too wet behind the ears, a wee bit too inexperienced, and with the huge loss of Mbeumo, the imminent departure of Wissa, I just think that there's too much went against Brentford in this window. They might save it with some mad crazy business before the window closes. Keith Andrews might be the second coming of Thomas Frank, and it might not even be like they've missed a step, missed a beat. I can get that, but from where I'm sitting, they're finished bottom of the table. But I don't think they're going to be cut off at the bottom. I really do think that these bottom 4 or 5 teams, 6 teams maybe, it's going to be really tight. You're talking about going to the last 3 games, the last 2, maybe even the last match of the season before this is all decided and shaken out. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down in the comment section down below. I've got Liverpool to win the league. I've got Aston Villa to win the Europa League, Crystal Palace to win the Conference League, City to win the Champions League. Who knows about the domestic cups, how they'll fall this year, but it could be one of the most historic Premier League campaigns we have ever seen, with so many teams, with so many reasons to be higher in the table than probably where I've projected them. I look forward to catching your thoughts and feelings and comments in the comment section down below. On screen there now is some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. If you haven't done so already, please do hit the subscribe button for more content like this. Have a great weekend, enjoy the football, stay out of trouble, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.